So, welcome everyone to the health and wellness meeting this week. Our topic is one that is important for all of us, and a topic that is key, well, for anyone who eats anything, drinks anything, or ever takes any kind of tablets or drugs or medications or prescriptions, and that's liver health. So we're gonna go there today. I have had quite my own journey with liver health. I've been diagnosed with hepatitis C virus in the past, and at this point I no longer have that diagnosis, but I have a lot of sensitivity to what it's like to have those acute impacts. I've also had both Hep A and Hep B, so I've gone through those times of just being yellow. And it's not fun. The impact on the body when the liver is really, really struggling is painful. The energy is just terrible. And those were for relatively short-term viruses for me, but alcoholic and non-alcoholic liver disease are huge problems that so many of us are going to face. And I don't know if it's the lucky ones who are asymptomatic or not, because asymptomatic might mean that you're a little bit more comfortable. You probably don't feel as good as you could, and you might not know that there's something really serious going on, that you can take some empowered lifestyle changes on board to turn it around, or at least slow down that progression, which many of us might know can end in cirrhosis or liver cancer. So we're going to talk about all this today. What is liver disease really? Why does it matter? Why does it impact those of us in the rooms especially? What can we do about it? What about supplements? There's a ton of them. What about detox and supplements? Maybe we should be doing that for our livers. Let's find out all about it. I'm Lulu Cook. I'm a counselor, dietitian, author, and in recovery myself for many years. I'm your trusty guide for these weekly wellness sessions where we dive into everything health and wellness, for emotional health, physical health, related to this path of recovery that we're on. Whatever our substances, whatever our behaviors of addiction were, or maybe still are, we are in this room, we're in this meeting because we're trying to feel as good as we can and have the best quality lives in recovery possible. So that's what we dive into here, with actionable tips and strategies to help you feel better, feel like you're in control and taking some positive actions for your health that really make a difference. The usual tech warnings still apply. I'll be giving some information. I'm recording it. Hopefully the recording will work and I can post it on my Facebook later. That's Gut Feeling Nutrition Therapy. That is where I post the videos when I get a good one. And then toward the end, I'll stop recording and open it up for comments. Please leave a question in the chat box as you go along. I'll try to pick that up. I think next week we might talk about something to do with sugar or food addiction. I know Halloween is different this year. Maybe some of us are relieved that we're not going to have the usual bucket full of candy coming home at the end of a night out with the kids. But just in case, I think we'll tackle that somehow in our discussion next week. So let's talk about the liver. It is a big organ. I wish I had a visual aid. Not that they're pretty, but it's a big organ. And if you've been to the GP and laid down on the examination table, they might have palpated, kind of knocking around on your torso and abdomen, trying to feel your liver. Those of us who have that history of heavy drinking or chronic drinking might have had some liver tenderness or an enlarged liver that you could actually feel in your torso. The liver is big because it does a lot. The liver is responsible for the metabolism of everything we eat: fats, carbohydrates, proteins. Fats, in fact, are the most work for the liver to process, to metabolize, to store, and to package. So as we go on and look at some of the dietary recommendations for different types of liver dysfunction, we'll see that fats play a key role there, because it's hard work on our liver to deal with those fats. A healthy liver can easily cope with a whole lifetime's worth of luscious, delicious, hopefully plant-based fats, but a failing liver doesn't cope as well with it. And it can be overtaxed, especially if you move into fibrosis or cirrhosis. And these are a continuation of severity of progression of liver disease. And it doesn't only have to be because of alcohol that we might end up with cirrhosis. We have that original insult to the liver or multiple insults. We get that inflammation, the liver starting to not work so well. It can move on to fibrosis, which you could kind of think of, when you get a scab on a boo-boo, and ultimately it is going to heal and the scab's going to fall apart, but there's that scab kind of protecting the boo-boo for a while it heals. Fibrosis is a little bit like that. And if we're not able to stop the progression at that point, it can go on to cirrhosis, in which really the whole liver just becomes this kind of dense scar tissue that's not able to do its job right anymore. Our liver stores huge amounts of nutrients and vitamins. It stores vitamin A, copper, vitamin B12, and then releases those nutrients as needed. So all of this work of transporting, detoxifying, metabolizing, sometimes even making all of these different kinds of nutrients means that the health of our liver is intimately linked to the health of our entire body. So pivotal to be thinking about all of this. And I'm going to take you out of the chat box now, person. Hope you come back. You can raise your hand to talk later, or you could just put a chat in there now, because I'm recording and want to be sure to preserve anonymity. So please be understanding of why I just took you out of that box there. So with all of this work that the liver does, one of the key things we think of that the liver does, something we might all be familiar with, is that the liver is the first stop for detoxification processes in the body. And we might think about this with alcohol. We might know that if you have that drink, the liver has to work hard to detoxify this toxic substance, the poisons in the alcohol. It's the liver that's going to work on pulling that apart, breaking it into smaller components like alcohol dehydrogenase, all of these other different kinds of things. So it's not just alcohol, though. It's any xenobiotic. A xenobiotic is a substance that is foreign to the body. It's a chemical substance that the body has to somehow figure out, how am I going to break this down and what am I going to do with it? How am I going to transform it into something that's not harmful and ultimately that I can eliminate from the body in some way? So that's the liver's role with detox, is processing these xenobiotics. This can include pharmaceutical drugs, whether it's a prescription, a prescription antidepressant. It could include over-the-counter drugs like just aspirin or Tylenol, environmental toxins, whether that's exposure to industrial chemicals in our workplaces or some of the neighborhoods that we live in, or even just those scented air fresheners that you plug into the wall and they put out those kinds of chemicals. Those are all environmental toxins that your liver has to work on processing. Alcohol, bacterial byproducts, all of these things that you definitely do not want building up in the system. So your liver's hard at work trying to get rid of those. And this can lead to a little bit of misunderstanding sometimes about what detoxification is, what that process is. There's all kinds of products and protocols and supplements and diets that are marketed to us saying that they're going to help remove toxins from the body, but there's actually not very much solid scientific evidence that those types of products work. And in fact, they're typically not well based on an understanding of how the detoxification process does work in the body. There's 3 different phases of detox: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 detox. They need the appropriate types and amounts of different enzymes in the body for these phases to be working well. It doesn't work to just take a supplement and try to bump that up for the most part. We do need a healthy a healthy system where we're eating the kinds of nutrients that will ensure that our liver and kidneys have the substances that they need and the tools that they need to be able to work as our detox organs. On the other hand, to be fair, some of the backlash against detox and the somewhat well-earned backlash from scientific quarters saying, oh, poo-pooing detox systems, detox protocols, oh, they don't work. While that is certainly overall true, we also, it takes more than just like a liver that still functions. Kind of like it takes more than just breathing and having a heart that beats for your body to be detoxifying all of these substances optimally. We can support our bodies to do that better. And the first way to start with is to just stop consuming the toxins, stop bringing them into the body, make it easier on the detox processes in the body. So there's a lot of research around these types of detox trials. There's no evidence that they're actually performing a physiological function in the body. And again, it's our liver, our lungs, our kidneys, that's our urinary tract system, even our sweating. All of this is helping detoxify us, and a diet with an appropriate balance of proteins and vegetables and fruits are primarily the dietary components that we need for our bodies to be detoxing well and for our liver to be detoxing well. I got a great question about using castor oil packs. So I'm going to toss that answer in here. Castor oil packs are, you take castor oil, and there's different ways to do it, but a common one is that you would soak like a small towel in the castor oil and kind of bundle it all up, maybe even put a heating pad in it, wrap it in plastic, and then rest it on your belly. And there's a lot of claims online about that castor oil packs can help with all kinds of things, including detox. And that has been investigated in some different scientific trials. What they have found is that if you consume castor oil orally, you can actually see a physiological effect in the body, measuring different types of lab parameters, that kinds of thing. Putting castor oil on the skin, there's no measurable response. Now, let me be clear. You do not want to consume castor oil orally. It is actually the nerve agent ricin is derived from castor oil. If you might remember, some years ago, there were some fairly horrible terrorist attacks using this nerve agent ricin. So it's derived from castor oil. It is not something to consume orally. In terms of any effect it has putting it on the skin, not much. Just the fact of placing that warm pack on your belly and resting might be helpful for some people with their digestive system. That could just feel soothing and relaxing for the digestive system. Otherwise, doesn't work so well. There is, however, quite a bit of research around this thing. It's not anything I'm signing up for. It's called sudden hair felting disorder, in which if you happened to use castor oil to moisturize and condition your hair, and you put the castor oil into your hair, and because of that chemical interaction, it can suddenly mat up and become what one research study wrote, that the hair becomes like a hard, stony mass resembling a bird's nest. It's irreversible and you have to cut off your hair. So don't consume castor oil orally. Don't put it on your hair. And then if it feels like it would be relaxing and supportive to do a castor oil pack, go for it. But there's not any specific physiological mechanism that's happening there. So, sort of a big picture of what that liver of ours is doing. What are the risk factors for liver disease? Well, many of us here who have either our own or with the people we know and love have that experience of heavy alcohol use will know that chronic alcohol dependence is a huge risk factor for liver problems. And in fact, having some fluctuations in those liver enzymes when you go in for your lab test is an early warning sign that your doctor might pick up that says, hey, you're probably drinking pretty steadily, pretty frequently, because we're seeing this early indicator, even if there's not a problem in your life around that yet, but we can see that impact on your liver from the elevated AST and ALT enzymes. So alcohol is a big one. Likewise, especially in recovery rooms, it would be hepatitis C, which can be transmitted certainly through IV drug use from not using safe gear to shoot up. That's a very common way that IV drug users could get hepatitis C, and also from unprotected sex in high-risk populations. And we see this, for instance, with some of the populations that might use methamphetamine as a party drug and going out and having perhaps unprotected sex. That can be a route that we see some hepatitis and liver disease spread. So those are kind of specific to our room. Also specific to these recovery rooms would be food. And we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk about non-alcoholic liver disease, because that is it's something that I think probably touches more of us actually than the alcoholic or hepatitis liver disease does. Other risk factors: you had a blood transfusion prior to 1992. Again, the IV drug use, dialysis history, having HIV, having gotten a tattoo from an unregulated place. Anybody who's got a jailhouse tat, that might have been a risk factor, because apparently sterility is not the top requirement of being able to do tattoos in jail. And in fact, in general, if you were born between 1945 and 1965, that's viewed as a risk factor all on its own for hepatitis C, just because regulations of some things weren't as tight as they were then. Or weren't as tight then as they are now. Liver disease may have some kind of genetic component. If everybody has similar risk factors, there could be a genetic component to it. Overall, Mexican Americans may be more likely to develop non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. African Americans may be slightly less likely as compared to white Americans. So maybe some racial or ethnic kind of risk factor sensitivity there as well. But the big one that I think touches all of it, before I get to that one, methamphetamine, I'm going to just list here as a risk factor for liver disease. It's highly, highly liver toxic. And in fact, what I found out doing the research here is part of the impact that methamphetamine has on the liver is that it gives your liver hyperthermia. It can do. So it's basically like it boils your liver, like it heats your liver up, meth does, and you get what's called hepatic hyperthermia, and that can lead to liver disease. Sounds unpleasant. A thing to keep in mind with opioids, and this would include doctor-prescribed opioids that are being used, even entirely appropriate to manage chronic pain. But for somebody who had any kind of a liver impairment, that's going to change how that pain-relieving drug is metabolized. Remember, that liver is doing so much work to metabolize any drugs or substances that come in. So even if it's prescribed and we want it to be working appropriately, if your liver is not healthy, you're not going to be able to metabolize it appropriately. And we do see that some people with liver disease aren't able to get the pain relief from opioid painkillers that might be appropriate in their circumstance. So those are perhaps the less common or more dramatic risk factors around liver disease. But here's the biggest one. Here's the number one liver disease risk factor that touches so much of our country, not just the people here in the rooms. It's obesity and overweight and non-alcoholic liver disease. Almost 71% of Americans are now, officially obese and overweight. Those of you who have been in these wellness sessions with me before know I'm a staunch advocate for the fact that we can be healthy and take great care of ourselves at any size body. So this is definitely not about pointing to carrying that extra weight as being any kind of certainly not any kind of a moral failing or anything like that. But the evidence is really clear that having extra weight, especially combined with some of the lifestyle factors we'll talk about, puts people at higher risk. there's been a 400% increase in the rate of morbid obesity since 1986. And this is just growing the ranks of people at risk of non-alcoholic liver disease. And so what we see, in fact, is that non-alcoholic liver disease is very much on the rise, most prevalent liver disease. And it may impact overall about 25% of adults in Western countries, 40 to 80% of people with type 2 diabetes, 30 to 90% of people who are officially obese. And of people who, in one study, there were people in obese body sizes who were preparing for bariatric surgery, weight loss surgery, of whom fully 90% had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So the symptoms here are pretty vague, but if we accept that approximately 25% of people in Western countries have some level of progression of this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, that touches a lot of us here in these rooms and in the other communities that we care about. The symptoms can be vague, especially at the beginning. They'd be things like pain, perhaps in the upper right abdomen, possibly fatigue, but typically you don't see any symptoms at the early stages. Even the liver enzymes can be normal for some time. But meanwhile, what's happening is your liver is storing more and more fat, that your body it's being consumed, it's coming in, your liver's working so hard to metabolize and package it and send it elsewhere in the body for storage, but at a certain point that it's just becoming such a surplus of this incoming fat that your body's now storing more and more of it in the liver. So you're literally packing that organ full of excess fat. So you can diagnose that if there might be the liver enzymes that are a clue. There might be your physical symptoms that are a clue, the fatigue, the abdominal pain. It could be that you would have an ultrasound if that was called for. And by the time it progresses from the liver just being inflamed all the way to cirrhosis, at that point the symptoms could include abdominal swelling, enlarged blood vessels right underneath the skin, enlarged breasts in men, red palms, jaundice, that's the yellow skin, yellow eyes, the one I experienced multiple times with hepatitis, not a cute look for me. Yeah. So we're seeing these big numbers, around 25% is a conservative estimate because of the crisis with obesity, with insulin resistance and blood sugar management, and with lifestyle. And this liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, is a progressive disease. That means many of us can turn it around now, before each of these hits starts getting worse. The hit of the extra fat being packed into the liver, the hit this takes on our insulin and blood sugar processing, the hit this takes to the level of stress the liver is feeling and no longer responding appropriately to other incoming substances, that whole spiral. We can start turning that around. Many of us can. One of the ways we do that is thinking about what we eat. So we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about the prevention and also some of these same tactics are how we could actually turn it around if we were already along that continuum of this happening. And I want to really encourage anyone who's feeling scared or feeling like, uh-oh, I think that's me, or I think that's my loved one, I think that's my parent, my spouse. The kinds of changes that are needed to either arrest or possibly even turn around this strain on the liver, they're fairly modest. So we say, for instance, one study showed that a decrease of about 200 calories a day and a weight loss of about 8 pounds altogether. It improved all of the liver enzyme markers in a group of people with non-alcoholic liver disease. In older adults with obesity, just a 10% weight loss over 6 months reduced liver fat by 45%. So some of the changes the changes we might make for vanity's sake, heaven knows, and the changes that we might make just because we want to feel our best and feel energetic and we feel better at a particular weight range. We don't even have to get all the way into our skinny jeans here to get this huge benefit for our liver. Just losing a few pounds might be really supportive for some of us. Cutting back 200 calories a day, or we'll talk about movement as well and exercise. Why did I star this note? Oh, well, it's about bariatric surgery. And I know that there's quite a few of us who come to this meeting and in these rooms who, perhaps in part because of the struggle with food and food addiction, at any rate, quite a few of us have had or know people who have had bariatric surgery, weight loss surgery. So I always star those, knowing that they might be of interest to some people. And this was research suggesting that bariatric surgery does not harm the liver, and in fact may help those liver enzymes normalize over time. However, this is one for us all to pay attention to. In doing that research, what they found was that really rapid weight loss can actually elevate the amount of fat stored in the liver. The liver is producing its own fatty acids to make up for the fact that you're not eating as many when you're undergoing really rapid weight loss. And it's just a sort of a real confusion for the liver. So, this is not personal medical advice by a long shot. It's just sort of one of those interesting, quirky ways that the body works, and that you would definitely want to talk about with your doctor or dietitian if these specifics applied to you, both with the liver disease and the weight loss. Randomized trials show that having a Mediterranean diet is likely to decrease the risk of having that extra fat stored in the liver. And so we've talked about that before. That's this gorgeous plant-based eating pattern with nuts and seeds and beans and legumes and maybe fish a few times a week, maybe a little bit of meat, little bit of dairy and cheese, but really the basis there being those plant-based foods, including the plant-based proteins, tremendously helpful for prevention of liver disease and turning it around if you're already there. Physical movement and exercise as well. And once again, you don't have to run a marathon. We're looking for these tiny changes. There was a study came out of Australia, so I always like to highlight our research that comes out of my home turf here. This was 141 adults with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and they started a pretty moderate exercise regimen of just 30 minutes of exercise 5 days a week. I know for some of us that's a big step, but just to say it's, half an hour most days of the week. It's, again, not 2 hours in the gym every night, right? And they found that this improved all of the liver enzymes. It improved blood sugar management, improved cholesterol, improved heart attack risk factors. And in fact, with this group of people who already had the beginnings of liver disease, they already had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, the group that exercised twice that amount didn't see any additional benefit. So you really don't have to aim for something that's just not where you're starting at and think, well, if I can't exercise for an hour a day, there's no point trying. No. Just this getting your body moving helps all of your organs work better, and you'll start to have those better outcomes. Now we're going to talk about food for a moment here, and I want to flag for those who are all the way down the progression to cirrhosis or end-stage liver disease. There's some unique nutrient requirements that are specific to when your liver just is not working anymore. You would probably need more energy altogether, more calories altogether, perhaps higher protein needs. Certainly need to look at some specific vitamin supplementation, because remember we mentioned all of those vitamins that are stored and metabolized in vitamins and minerals stored and metabolized in the liver, the copper, the vitamin A, B12. So you might have some specific supplementation needed if you're all the way over to cirrhosis yet. And you, again, would want to talk about that with your doctor or dietitian. It's not really the focus of of what we're talking about. We're more so talking about earlier on that progression, and for those of us who want to stop it from getting to that point while we still have that freedom. So what are the kinds of foods that are going to help with any kind of liver disease? Well, it's high fiber foods, oats, for example. High fiber foods would include any of the plant foods, that's beans and legumes, whole grains, all of the vegetables. But things like oats and barley are particularly well connected with research into liver health. Vegetables are sources of phytochemicals. Those are plant-based chemicals that are very protective. So a particular class of those called chlorogenic acids. Blech. Chlorogenic acids, that's a mouthful. Really, really specifically connected with liver health. So that's apples, artichoke, eggplant, potatoes, kiwi, pears, and coffee and tea, which we're going to talk about specifically because any of you who are on my Facebook page, Gut Feeling Nutrition Therapy, you know that I am always posting any research I can find exonerating coffee from its bad reputation. It's truly one of our magical health food elixirs, minus the added sugar, minus all the stuff we dump into it, but coffee on its own, so good for us. And certainly that's the case with liver health. It's a stunning correlation. So we're going to talk about that specifically. Nuts and almonds, again, these are high fiber, they're good protein. They're also a good source of vitamin E, which may protect against fatty liver disease. Almonds, for example, they're also good for our hearts, right? So these are great things to be grabbing to snack on, those nuts and seeds. Now, green tea, which is a highly anti-inflammatory beverage, so it's good for our entire system for decreasing inflammation. It truly does have some compounds that are associated with increased metabolism, making it that littlest bit easier to maintain a weight range that feels happy and healthy and high energy for you. I am not promising that drinking green tea a day, along with not making other health changes, this is not going to lose you the weight, but it does help that little tiny extra bit. So green tea is good to include. I think if somebody just texted and asked if I can come into the big box, I think I am there. So hopefully that was an older, hopefully you can see me. I should be there. So green tea, besides the fact that it's anti-inflammatory and protective against some types of cancer, it also has these antioxidants called catechins. These are plant chemicals, and these are protective against liver cancer. You get more of the catechins. I don't think I've ever heard that word pronounced out loud before. I've just read it. So you get more of the catechins if you brew the green tea yourself and drink it hot. So iced tea or ready to drink, green tea powders have much lower levels, but still some. It's still a perfectly reasonable beverage to choose. Now let's talk about coffee. Are we ready? I wish I had my coffee mug with me, but I finished it a while ago. I'd have it for my little prop. Coffee is so good for our livers. Mysterious and magical, I don't know why, but it really is. Studies show that anything from 2 to 4 cups a day of coffee can protect your liver from damage caused by too much alcohol or an unhealthy diet. It may lower the risk of liver cancer and reduce the likelihood of liver insults to the liver, leading to fibrosis and then all the way to cirrhosis. So it limits the damage from the xenobiotics, certainly the alcohol, any other substances your body's working hard to detoxify. Coffee seems to make it easier for liver to do its job without having those negative impacts. It can slow those conditions in some people who have them. And it doesn't matter if it's filtered coffee, instant coffee, or espresso. In fact, something like a drip coffee is it's a high fiber source for many people within American diet. They get a lot of fiber out of coffee, mostly because we're not eating enough vegetables and beans and whole grains. But there you go, coffee. All around awesome. It is possible to develop a tolerance to coffee and an addiction. You have to know what your cutoff point is, and that's generally genetic. Some people really are able to have that cup of black coffee at 9 p.m. and go to sleep at 9:15. That's a genetically given gift. I don't have it, so I know when my cutoff time is in the afternoon to stop drinking coffee after that. And if you're bothered by the sense of dependence on coffee, it's certainly true you can get those headaches if you try to wean off too quickly, and you might want to take it easy in terms of how you taper yourself down. But if you're thinking about it from the perspective of liver health and you're in a range of coffee intake that works for you and you're not wired and you're not insomniac, then you're probably just fine enjoying it. The most benefit probably comes from the caffeinated coffee rather than decaffeinated kinds, but the research is still going on the decaf. You may still be getting some benefit there. So I hope I made my case. Moving on to other good things. Vegetables. So these are a good source of glutathione. Glutathione is a natural detoxifier that can help your liver continue working right. Some people buy glutathione as a supplement, as a quote detox supplement, and it mostly doesn't work well for that purpose in the body. Glutathione gets broken down into 3 other amino acids in the body, in the digestive system. You're not absorbing that very expensive glutathione tablet that you probably paid some hard-earned money for. It's just not absorbing and coming into your system to function as detoxifying glutathione. So it's not a great supplement to use, but consuming the foods that are going to keep providing the raw materials to your body is a great idea. And that's why, okay, I am still in the little box. I don't know why I'm in the little box. I look like I'm in the big box to me. Well, thanks for letting me know that I'm in the little box, everybody. I don't know what to do about that. I look like I'm in the big box. So I guess you'll just have to bear with me. Oh, cool. Thank you. I just kept pushing buttons and apparently maybe that worked. Isn't it fun when it works out that way? Okay, moving on. More good things to eat. This is the part I love. It's talking about all this delicious, wonderful stuff that we get to eat to get those health benefits and to support our healthy liver. Blueberries. Blueberries are amazing. I was just telling a client this morning, she's worried about cognitive decline as she ages, and we were talking about how powerful the research is around blueberries specifically and other purple, blue fruits and vegetables that have chemicals called anthocyanins in them. Really potent for helping improve cognitive function, particularly as we age, is what some of those specific studies are around, but they also are protective against non-alcoholic fatty liver disease due to, again, those plant chemicals, polyphenols. Other foods that are rich in polyphenols, if you don't like blueberries, first off, if you don't like blueberries, give them to me, I'll eat yours, and then you might like to have plums, olives, and dark chocolate instead. Those are other good sources of polyphenols, and come to think about it, I'd love to have some of those as well. So herbs and spices can be liver protective. They're really incredibly potent. Many of us might be aware that cumin, turmeric, these kinds of herbs help with blood sugar management. They decrease inflammation. They're also linked with liver health, being good sources of polyphenols. So specifically oregano, sage, rosemary, cinnamon, curry powder, cumin. These are all linked with good liver health, and they make our food taste so delicious. So what to avoid? Well, I always like to put the focus front and center on what we get to eat more of before I break the bad news to you about the things that are not so helpful. First off, number 1, alcohol. Just every single time we have a sip, it's a huge, huge strain on our liver to detoxify all that, and I don't think I need to say too much more about that. High-fat foods are hard for our liver to process, particularly the more highly processed ones that are going to come in also with salt and also with preservatives and all of these additional xenobiotics that our liver's going to have to work hard to metabolize. Saturated fat is particularly hard on our liver to manage. That's fats that come primarily from animal sources. And over time, a really high saturated fat intake can lead to liver inflammation and then moving down that line toward the cirrhosis. Additionally, the omega-3 fatty acids are protective. So these are the fats that we get from seafood, especially things like sardines or salmon. We get omega-3 fatty acids. We also get them from plant-based sources like walnuts and flaxseed, hemp seeds, chia seeds, all of these kinds of things. So omega-3 fats, protective, pulling inflammation down. Saturated fats, primarily from full-fat dairy, and I hate to have to say that. I love heavy whipping cream, and I'm not giving it up. I just make sure it has it occupies a small portion of my diet, whereas if I could, I would just have glasses of heavy whipping cream to drink. But I know that's too much work for my liver to do. So encouraging you, don't feel like this means all or nothing for most of this stuff. It just means where does this item fit into my diet? And saturated fat, if we're wanting to protect our livers, the saturated fat, the animal-based fats probably are better off being on the lighter side in terms of how much of our diet those comprise. Salt, we do need some salt, but probably not as much as many of us are getting. Early research suggests that too much salt can be a contributing factor in fibrosis. So that's that beginning of that liver scarring. And we get it primarily from processed foods. Many of us are eating at home more. So maybe some of that sodium consumption is coming down. That would be a great thing. It's processed foods, packaged foods, frozen foods, takeaway foods. Those are all going to be really high in salt. So choosing fresh and cooking from home, even if you use the salt shaker and put some on, the odds are going to be that you are much lower in the amount of salt. And also processed meats, again, besides the saturated fat content, things like bacon or deli meat are likely to be very high in sodium as well. Not working in our favor there. Okay, here's the sad news, all of you trick-or-treaters out there who were just warming up to a big pillowcase full of lollies and candy. Not the best move for liver health. Didn't you know I was going to say sugar too? It can take a toll on your liver. And partly this is because one aspect of your liver's job, one of its many jobs, is to convert sugar that we consume into fat. So if we consume too much sugar, our liver makes too much fat, and that then ends up hanging around where it doesn't belong, including being packed more tightly into the liver. So keeping the focus, moving away from the sweets, the packaged pastry foods, the foods that are loaded with extra sugar, salt, and fat, turning our focus away from those, not never, but just turning away toward more of those fresh, rich foods, the blueberries, the walnuts, the salmon, the beans. This is going to be a big move forward for our liver health, and it's also going to just feel great in terms of all the other benefits being offered to your body. So that doesn't mean you never get a candy corn again, but it means you might do better to start with a little bag of sugar snap peas dipped into hummus. Eat that first before you have those couple of little candy corns. So being aware of medications, as we said earlier, any meds or prescriptions or substances you consume, your liver has to metabolize for you. So something like acetaminophen, often brand name Tylenol, we might think. This is in more than 600 medications, cold and flu drugs. The recommendation is that adults not consume more than 4,000 milligrams a day, because more than that can hurt your liver. So perhaps for somebody who has, let's say, a twisted ankle and they're taking Tylenol for that, and then also maybe a cold and they're taking a cold remedy that has acetaminophen in it, you might potentially overshoot the limit of how much is safe to have today for your liver health. Other medications can do that as well, especially if you don't take them as prescribed. It also depends on your genes. It depends on the interaction with other prescriptions or drugs or herbs that you're consuming. So clues that you might want to double check that list of medications, whether it's prescription or over the counter. Clues that maybe you're overtaxing your liver with them would be excessive fatigue, nausea. If you're itchy, actually if your skin is really itchy, that can be a clue that there's something happening with your liver there. And certainly the yellowish eyes and skin, that jaundice after you start a new medicine, we see that sometimes in the medical literature from statins or antibiotics. So nothing to freak out and panic about at that first instance, but it is something to have a chat to the pharmacist about. Now let's talk about supplements, primarily herbal supplements, because many of us rely on these to be safe, natural ways to help support our health. And gosh, what could be more natural than a beautiful herb that grows out there in my garden or out in the bush, right? Well, these can be very potent substances, the plant medicine, the medicines that are in these plants, the chemicals and substances can be very powerful, so much so that herbal supplements are one of the top reasons for emergency room presentations for liver problems. At the very extreme end of that, in 2013, there were 56 people who got liver failure from a supplement, Oxy Elite, meant to be like a weight loss supplement purporting to have these great natural herbs in it. 56 people got liver failure from it and one person died. That won't be the case for most people, but something that is worth reflecting on for those of us who maybe do have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or perhaps somewhere on that progression of alcoholic liver disease. If our liver is already impaired, it is an extra strain on it to try to process and metabolize these kinds of potent herbal supplements. And there are many, many specific herbs that have been directly identified here: aloe vera, senna, valerian, kava, green tea extract. Herbalife supplements are renowned for these kinds of emergency room liver situations. Ayurvedic supplements, traditional Chinese medicine supplements, all of these, I just cannot emphasize enough how often, especially for people with pre-existing liver sensitivities, how often this can be dangerous. So herbal supplements cause almost a quarter of all liver damage, so dwarfing something like alcohol, actually. And part of the reason why some of them have particular alkaloid substances in them, and they actually block the tiny blood vessels inside your organs, your liver, and that can happen over time, or it could happen all at once if somebody happened to take a poorly labeled supplement and accidentally took twice as much, and that kind of thing. You could accidentally sort of overdose, so to speak, even on these seemingly natural and safe herbal products, and get the blocked blood vessels in your liver right off the bat. So there's other common supplements that we associate with the liver: milk thistle, turmeric, astragalus, and honestly, there's not very much really well-conducted science behind them. But we're going to talk about a couple of them. Colloidal silver is sometimes used for hepatitis C, but there's just very little scientific support for that, and there are case studies published in the literature of people whose skin turned blue from overdoing the colloidal silver. So my goodness, this liver business can just impact the color of our skin, can't it? We get the jaundice, we turn yellow, we overdo the colloidal silver, we turn blue. Hard to find the right balance there. So the bottom line here is to talk to a knowledgeable healthcare practitioner about all of the medications, including the herbs and supplements that you might be taking, particularly if you have pre-existing liver concerns. And sometimes, remember, it's not the one herb or the one product that's the problem, it's the interaction of how they all get metabolized together by your liver. Some supplements that do have potential benefit behind them would include vitamin E, which can also be toxic at high dose, so you want to be sure that you get the dose right on that. Vitamin D, So getting adequate vitamin D. And for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere heading into winter and locked up indoors, vitamin D becomes much more front and center regards making sure that we have adequate levels of that. Gut health, there's actually new research happening now around what's being called the gut-liver axis. So this is specifically in people with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and linking an altered population of gut bugs, altered gut microbiota with liver function. And so all of the usual probiotic options, including possibly supplements, but the probiotic foods are going to help there as well. Supplements like spirulina might help for the liver. One called SAMI can be helpful for the liver as well. Stool color, there's a question just came in. Stool color is an indicator of jaundice along with, so your skin your skin and eyes can turn like this dark yellow color, and meanwhile your stools get pale. And, for me, when I was really sick with hepatitis, it was like really noticeably different color, kind of spooky, different kind of color. Spooky poops. Still in that Halloween vibe. Sorry for a really terrible joke. So I want to talk about milk thistle, and then I'll stop. You've been so patient with all of this really kind of detailed information. But milk thistle is probably the most common supplement recommended for liver health. And here's what I can tell you about milk thistle. Many of us, if we are taking it, are absolutely not taking the kind that helps, because that would really need to be silymarin, which is silymarin, the active component that's been identified from milk thistle, but not all over-the-counter type herbal supplements have that in it or have enough in it to potentially be doing any good. If you're not actively consuming substances that could harm your liver, whether that's alcohol, whether that's exposure to environmental toxins, whether that's maybe you do have that sprained ankle and you're taking a lot of acetaminophen right now, that's a strain. In that case, if you're actively consuming liver-harming substances, silymarin might help, is what the research really shows. Unlikely to hurt, it might help. If you're not actively consuming dangerous substances right now that your liver's having to actively try to metabolize out, taking the milk thistle is unlikely to help. So let's say you already have an advanced liver disease and you're no longer consuming any of those really dangerous substances. Taking the milk thistle, taking the silymarin, probably not likely to help. But again, probably not likely to harm anything either. It can, however, help counteract a poisonous overdose from death cap mushrooms. So not sure if that applies to anyone here. Hopefully nobody here is eating toxic death cap mushrooms. But if you were, milk thistle could be useful. So yeah, I just wanted to be sure to get that in because that's such a common one and I get asked about it a lot. So that's it. That's the deep dive. Eat more healthy foods, eat more vibrantly colored fruits and vegetables and whole grains, stay active, try to keep your weight within an officially healthy weight range, but certainly maintaining that exercise and activity, maybe losing a few pounds is going to really help. Reduce the environmental toxins that you're exposed to. Cleaning products, insecticides, spray cans, household items. These can hurt the cells in our liver, including if we take them in through our skin or inhale them. Vaccinations, it's possible to get vaccinated for hepatitis A and hepatitis B. There is not currently a vaccination for hep C. So especially if you already have a weakened immune system or you already have some liver damage from something else, you might want to think about those vaccinations and not open the door to getting an acute infection that could just not be helpful. So, okay. Got some great questions coming in now. And so I want to say Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope I convinced you that this is a topic that matters for all of us, because we are all eating things and drinking things and taking the occasional tablet or herb. So it matters, and we want to have the information to help us be empowered with our health and be savvy about those choices. Know what we can do to protect ourselves. If you want more information, please pop me a note, Lulu at Gut Feeling Coaching, LULU. I'm happy to talk with you about if and how I can help with you. I work with private clients, and I also just provide a lot of information on my Facebook page, Gut Feeling Nutrition Therapy. Just put out a newsletter a couple days ago. If you're not getting my newsletter, let me know. I'll put you on the list. It's a good one. I put it out incredibly rarely, so I'm not going to clog your inbox with it. But when I do put it out, it's got some great actionable things and tasty recipes you can usually rely on. Until then, please be kind to yourself. You're doing an awesome job, and you are taking proactive steps for your health just by being here. And I thank you for your time and attention. So now